The air in the conference room felt heavy, the faint hum of the workshop's systems in the background doing little to ease the tension. Gunnar stood at the head of the table, his cybernetic arm resting on the edge, the fingers tapping a steady rhythm that betrayed the storm of thoughts behind his calm exterior. The team was seated around him, their expressions ranging from grim to expectant. The events of the past few days lingered in everyone's minds, the detainee taken by what they believed to be Homeland Security agents, only for Sophia to confirm it hadn't been her team. Whoever had staged the operation had both the resources and the audacity to impersonate Homeland, leaving Echo Division with more questions than answers. Gunnar straightened, his voice cutting through the silence. We're at a crossroads. Someone took our detainee, and they made it look like Homeland. Sophia's confirmed it wasn't them. Whoever it was, they're not just coming after us, they're playing with fire, and they don't care who gets burned. He let the weight of his words settle before continuing. I'll be gone for a few days. Clara's graduation in Alfheim can't wait, and there are some other matters I need to handle while I'm there. But this doesn't mean we stop moving. Everyone has their assignments, and I expect answers by the time I get back. His gaze shifted to Darren first. Darren, your focus is on the drug. Ravina's pushing it, but she's not working alone. Rose has her ear to the ground in places we can't reach. Go to her and share only what's necessary. See if she's caught wind of anything. Distribution networks, suppliers, anything that ties back to this drug's source. Darren leaned back in his chair, his trademark smirk firmly in place, though his eyes held a glint of seriousness. Charm Rose into spilling her secrets? Sounds like my kind of mission. Gunnar's expression didn't waver. Just remember, Darren, Rose isn't an ally. Don't walk out of there owing her anything. Darren gave a mock salute. Got it, boss. Charm, not debt. Gunnar turned to Eli, who was already flipping through diagnostics on her tablet, her violet eyes glinting with determination. Eli, the security system is top priority. Whoever took our detainee walked through our defenses like they didn't exist. Find the gaps, seal them, and make sure this place is locked down tighter than ever. I don't want anyone slipping past us again. Eli nodded sharply. I'm already running diagnostics. The Voidstone traces might have interfered with our wards last time, but I'll make sure it doesn't happen again. If anyone tries to get in, they'll regret it. Next, his gaze fell on Ashley and Desiree, seated side by side. Ashley, Desiree, I need you two digging into who took our detainee. If it wasn't Homeland, then it was someone with the resources to stage a full tactical extraction. Start with law enforcement chatter and supernatural networks. If there's a whisper of who pulled this off, I want it. Desiree, her grey eyes sharp and unyielding, nodded. We'll find them. No one gets away with pulling a stunt like that. Ashley leaned forward slightly, her voice quiet but steady. We'll cover every lead, Gunnar. Whoever they are, they won't stay hidden for long. Finally, Gunnar turned to Shade and Karina. His tone softened slightly, though it lost none of its intensity. Shade, Karina, while I'm gone, I need you both to keep things steady. Karina, you're stepping into your role, but this isn't the time for rash decisions. The drug, the Black Dawn, and now this impersonation. These are moves in a bigger game. Stay focused and don't take unnecessary risks. Karina met his gaze, her expression firm. I understand. I'll hold things together. Shade, his presence calm and steady as ever, inclined his head. We'll make sure everything runs smoothly. Gunnar took a step back, scanning the room one last time. You've got your assignments. Keep your heads down, stay sharp, and don't trust anyone outside this room until we have answers. As the meeting adjourned, the team dispersed, each member already turning their thoughts to their tasks. Gunnar lingered in the secure portal room, the swirling light of the Alfheim gateway casting shifting shadows across his face. Clara's graduation was waiting, and so was unfinished business in Alfheim. But as he stepped through the portal, he couldn't shake the weight of the mystery left behind, a reminder that, even in his absence, the fight was far from over. The Shadow Realm bar was a cauldron of muted chaos, the smoky air thick with tension. Rose sat in her usual corner, nursing a glowing drink, her mind churning over the latest disruption to her domain. The drug circulating through the bar wasn't just a threat to her control, it was an affront to her authority, a reminder that someone thought they could move product in her territory without her blessing. She'd reached out to Darren, not because she trusted him, but because she needed answers. The pack had resources and reach, and even though Rose wouldn't admit it, she needed help to keep her kingdom intact. When Darren walked in unannounced, she raised an eyebrow but didn't look surprised. His timing, as always, was inconvenient. "Well, if it isn't my favourite stray," she drawled, gesturing to the seat across from her. "I thought you'd need more than a single day to figure out this little puzzle of ours." Darren smirked, sliding into the seat. "And I thought you'd be too busy playing queen to care about a few rogue dealers." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "The moment they step into my bar, they're my business. You know how this works." He leaned back, his posture casual but his tone serious. "All right. What do you have for me? Or are we just here to trade insults?" Rose's fingers trailed along the rim of her glass as she studied him. Whispers, mostly. Ravina's involved, of course, but you already knew that. What you don't know is that she's using intermediaries. Fresh faces, untraceable connections. Smart, if irritating. Darren nodded slowly, taking in her words. "You don't have names, then?" Her smirk widened. "If I did, we wouldn't be having this conversation. But there's a pattern in her movements. She's testing the waters, seeing how far she can push before someone pushes back." "Someone like you," Darren said. "Someone like me," Rose agreed, swirling her drink. "Now it's your turn. What have you found, oh wise emissary of the pack?" Darren hesitated for a fraction of a second, debating how much to share. The drug isn't just for kicks. It's affecting supernaturals differently depending on their type. It's not just about power. It's about control. Rose's eyes flickered with interest. "Control, you say?" "Control," Darren repeated. "And whoever's distributing it isn't just interested in making a profit, they're building something." The tension between them hung heavy as they locked eyes, the conversation teetering between alliance and manipulation. Before either could say more, the door to the bar swung open and a figure stumbled inside. The noise in the bar faltered as Argos entered, her chest heaving, her sharp yellow eyes darting around the room. Her hand clutched the edge of the counter, her body rigid with fear and exhaustion. Rose's eyes narrowed as she took in the sight, her mind immediately shifting gears. "Well, well," Rose murmured, leaning back in her chair. "Looks like the night just got more interesting." Darren turned to follow her gaze, his instincts sharpening at the sight of the newcomer. He didn't recognize Argos, but the tension she carried was palpable. This was someone running from something dangerous. Before he could speak, the door slammed open again with a force that echoed through the room. The captain strode in, his presence a thundercloud of authority and malice. The crowd parted instinctively, drawn back by an unseen force that compelled silence. Rose rose gracefully from her chair, her dark eyes locking onto the captain with a mix of irritation and intrigue. "You must be new," she said, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Let me explain how things work. You don't come into my bar and start making demands." The captain didn't break stride, his cold gaze fixed on Argos. "Step aside," he said, his voice low and commanding. Rose tilted her head, a glint of defiance in her eyes. "Big guy, you've got two options. 1, you turn around and walk out before this gets messy. 2, The captain's hand lashed out faster than anyone could react. The sharp crack of the slap echoed through the bar as Rose staggered back, her smirk replaced by a fiery glare. Gasps erupted across the room, and Darren was already on his feet, his stance loose but ready, his expression sharpening. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," Rose growled, straightening as she brushed her hair from her face. Darren stepped forward, his voice calm but icy. That's enough. His dark eyes locked onto the captain, his tone steady and unyielding. You know the rules. No fighting in here, no exceptions. The captain sneered, his hand twitching toward the weapon at his side. This doesn't concern you. It does, Darren replied, his voice a quiet warning. I like this place, and I don't take kindly to people breaking its rules. Before the captain could respond, the bar's enforcers stepped forward, 3 massive figures with stone-like skin, their towering forms casting long shadows over the room. They didn't speak, but their presence was a wall of unspoken threat. Then Silas appeared, his calm, commanding presence silencing the room entirely. He approached the captain with measured steps, his expression unreadable. You violated the truce, Silas said, his voice low but resonant. This bar is a sanctuary. You know what that means? The captain's sneer faltered, uncertainty flickering across his face. Before he could respond, the enforcers grabbed his arms, their grip unyielding. Silas pulled a rune-covered device from his pocket, activating it with a soft hum. No, the captain snarled, struggling against the enforcers. You can't. The beam of light from the device enveloped him, and with a sudden flash he vanished into a swirling portal. The room fell silent, the tension dissipating like smoke. Rose adjusted her jacket, her smirk creeping back despite the red mark blooming on her cheek. She turned her attention to Argos, who was still frozen by the counter, her trembling hands clutching her jacket. Well, darling, Rose said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy, it seems trouble has a way of finding you. Argos stiffened. I didn't mean for this to happen. Oh, I'm sure you didn't, Rose said, her tone almost teasing. She glanced at Darren, who stood nearby, his sharp gaze fixed on her and Argos alike. What's this about, Rose? Darren asked, his tone edged with suspicion. Rose tilted her head, her smirk softening into something more calculated. Let's just say our little friend here is of significant interest. Darren crossed his arms, his gaze narrowing. And you didn't think to mention this earlier? Rose waved a hand dismissively. I don't share all my secrets, dear. Darren held her gaze for a moment before turning to Argos, his tone softening slightly. You all right? Argos hesitated before nodding, her yellow eyes wary. I just need to figure out what to do next. Rose's calculating gaze flicked between them before she leaned back against the bar. Don't worry, darling. You're in good hands. For now. Rose's smirk softened into something almost genuine. Smart girl. She extended her hand, the diamond ring catching the light. Argos hesitated before shaking it, her sharp yellow eyes wary. As the tension in the bar began to ease, Rose glanced at Darren, her playful smirk returning. See? I'm not so bad. Darren huffed, running a hand through his hair. Let's hope she doesn't regret it. Before the room could fully settle, the door swung open again. Caleb strode in, his jacket torn and a fresh bruise blooming on his cheek, his sharp eyes scanning the room as if expecting trouble. Evelyn followed close behind, her expression tight with worry, though her movements were as measured as ever. Her sharp eyes locked onto Argos, and her relief was almost palpable. Thank the stars, Evelyn muttered, her pace quickening as she made her way toward the counter. Caleb, for his part, skipped the pleasantries and planted himself in front of Argos, his posture protective as his gaze swept over her. You all right? His tone was gruff, but the concern was unmistakable. Argos nodded, the knot in her chest loosening slightly. I should be asking you that. You're the one who stayed behind. Gave him the slip, Caleb said, glancing toward the bar door as if expecting the captain to return. Barely. Evelyn folded her arms, her tone sharp but laced with relief. And you didn't think to avoid getting punched in the face? Caleb shot her a look. It's not exactly my specialty, Ev. Nearby, Darren, who had been watching silently, stepped forward. His sharp gaze flicked between Caleb and Evelyn, sizing them up. "Friends of yours?" he asked Argos, his tone casual but his curiosity unmistakable. Argos hesitated, glancing at Caleb and Evelyn for guidance. Caleb's eyes narrowed slightly, his instincts clearly on high alert as he studied Darren. "Yeah, we're her friends," Caleb said curtly, his tone clipped and defensive. "And you are?" "Darren," he said smoothly, extending a hand. Caleb didn't take it, his expression unchanging. Darren raised an eyebrow, holding his hand in the air for a beat before letting it drop. "Nice to meet you too." Before the conversation could escalate, Rose stepped between them, her commanding presence silencing any potential for conflict. "All right, boys," she said lightly, though her tone carried a firm edge. "Let's not start measuring who's got the bigger ego." Darren frowned at her, clearly unimpressed. "Rose, we're not done talking." "Oh, but we are," she replied, her smirk unwavering. "For now." Turning to him, her dark eyes glittered with amusement. "Go cool off, Darren. We'll finish our little chat later." Darren's jaw tightened, his frustration clear, but after a long pause, he nodded. "Fine, but don't think I'm letting this go." "Wouldn't dream of it," Rose said sweetly, her tone dripping with sarcasm. Darren threw one last glance at Argos, his eyes sharp with curiosity and concern, before turning and heading for the door. The weight of the bar's tension followed him out, the door swinging shut behind him. The cool night air hit Darren like a slap as he stepped out of the Shadow Realm bar. The heavy door shut behind him with a metallic clang, cutting off the dim glow and faint hum of magical energy inside. He paused on the cracked pavement, his hands shoved deep into his jacket pockets, his mind running through everything he'd just seen. Rose had been her usual infuriating self, doling out breadcrumbs of information while keeping her motives hidden. But the drug wasn't just shaking up the supernatural underworld, it was destabilizing everything. And then there was the captain. His raw, oppressive power and blatant disregard for the bar's rules felt like the harbinger of something far worse. Darren's boots crunched on gravel as he made his way back to the workshop's secure portal. The faint glow of its runes shimmered in the dark, a comforting reminder of the pack's resources. With a muttered incantation Eli had given him, the portal flared to life, bathing the surrounding woods in an ethereal light. Inside the workshop, the team had gathered in the conference room. The atmosphere was tense, each member focused on their tasks, while Gunner's absence loomed in the background. Repairs to the workshop were ongoing, and the faint hum of recalibrated wards echoed through the halls. Eli sat at the head of the table, her violet eyes locked on her tablet as she scrolled through diagnostic reports. Ashley and Desiree leaned against the far wall, their postures relaxed but their expressions sharp. Shade sat near the edge of the table, his calm presence grounding the room, while Karina stood by the window, her arms crossed as she stared out into the dark forest. When Darren walked in, all eyes turned to him. "You're late," Eli said without looking up, her voice cutting through the silence. Darren smirked, pulling a chair out with a scrape of metal. "Good to see you too." Ashley straightened, her green eyes narrowing. "Well, what did Rose have to say?" Darren dropped into the chair, running a hand through his hair. "She confirmed Ravina's behind the drug, but says she's using intermediaries to move it. Fresh faces, untraceable connections. Smart, but it means we've got no direct line to her yet." Eli paused mid-swipe, finally looking up. "Did she say anything about the drug's effects?" "Control," Darren said simply. "It's about control. The drug isn't just addictive, it's affecting supernaturals differently depending on their type. It's not just about power. Whoever's behind this is building something bigger." Shade's dark eyes narrowed. "And what about Rose? Did she offer anything else?" Darren hesitated, his smirk fading. "She mentioned Ravina's testing the waters, pushing boundaries to see how far she can go. But that's not the part that stuck." Karina turned from the window, her piercing gaze locking onto him. What's stuck, then? Darren leaned forward, his tone darkening. Some guy, Rose called him the captain, showed up and broke the bar's no-violence rule, slapped Rose across the face like it was nothing. Silas had to portal him out, but not before the guy made it clear he didn't care about the rules. That kind of arrogance usually comes with a lot of power behind it. DeSera, who had been listening quietly, finally spoke. Did Rose seem afraid of him? Not afraid, Darren replied. Angry, pissed even. But she knew better than to push too far. She's playing her cards close, like always, but the whole place was on edge. Whatever's happening there, it's big. Eli tapped her stylus against the table, her expression thoughtful. If this captain is connected to the drug, he might be more than just muscle. He could be a player in this whole operation. Ashley crossed her arms. Or a threat waiting to make a bigger move. Karina's voice cut through the tension, firm and resolute. Whatever he is, he's part of something bigger. We need to figure out how it all connects. Ravina, the captain, the drug. Eli nodded, her tone measured. I'll keep analysing the voidstone traces in the blood sample. Maybe there's something we missed, something that could point to Ravina's endgame. Darren leaned back, his smirk returning faintly. And I'll keep my ear to the ground. Rose loves her secrets, but she always gives me just enough to stay interesting. Shade's voice was quiet but firm. We should also be ready for retaliation. If Rose is right about Ravina pushing boundaries, it's only a matter of time before those boundaries snap. The room fell into a thoughtful silence, each member turning the information over in their minds. With Gunnar gone, the weight of their decisions felt heavier, the stakes clearer. Finally, Eli broke the silence, her voice calm but determined. All right, let's get to work. The shimmering light of Alfheim's portal dissipated, leaving Gunnar standing on an ancient stone platform. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the faint scent of blooming wildflowers and pine. In the distance, the crystalline spires of Alfheim's capital gleamed against the twilight sky, their ethereal glow reflecting the magic that pulsed through the realm. Gunnar adjusted the strap of his pack, his cybernetic arm glinting faintly in the soft light. This realm always felt like stepping into another world entirely, untouched, vibrant, yet weighted by centuries of history and power. He didn't linger on the view long. He had work to do. Gunnar made his way to a secluded courtyard near the heart of the city. Eliana Vale awaited him, her platinum hair cascading like a river of light over her intricately woven robes. She held her staff lightly, its runes shimmering with soft energy. Gunnar, Eliana greeted, her voice calm but tinged with curiosity. You're troubled. He nodded, wasting no time. Always. But this time, it's about more than just the usual chaos. He stepped closer, his expression hardening. The Black Dawn is gaining traction. We've seen their reach extend into places it shouldn't. Earth, the Shadow Realm, maybe even here. Ileana's gaze sharpened. And you fear they'll outpace your ability to respond? Exactly, Gunnar admitted. Eli's overwhelmed. She's not just our technomancer, she's our ammo supplier. Every bullet, every enchanted round, we rely on her, and she's working herself to the bone. If this keeps escalating, we're going to run out of time and resources. Eliana tilted her head, considering his words. You seek a way to lighten her burden. Not just lighten, Gunnar said. I need a solution that keeps us supplied no matter how bad things get. A way to mass-produce what Eli does without compromising the precision or magic. Eliana's expression softened, a flicker of admiration crossing her face. Your concern for your team is admirable, and your foresight is wise. She turned, gesturing for Gunnar to follow her through an archway into a chamber filled with glowing artifacts and softly humming devices. The chamber was quiet, save for the soft hum of magic resonating from the crystalline walls. Eliana Vale moved gracefully between ancient artifacts and glowing consoles. her platinum hair catching the ethereal light. Gunnar stood near the center, his cybernetic arm resting against his side as he observed her movements. This room, nestled in the heart of Alfheim's capital, was as much a repository of knowledge as it was a symbol of the realm's timeless power. "You've come with a full plate of concerns, as always," Eliana said without looking up, her fingers dancing over a rune-carved panel. "The Black Dawn, a drug destabilizing supernaturals, and ammunition production. You must feel the weight of every realm pressing down on you." "It's what I signed up for," Gunnar replied, his voice steady but carrying a hint of weariness. "But this time it feels different. The Black Dawn's reach is growing, and the drug is just one of the ways they're testing the waters." Eliana paused, turning to meet his gaze. Her piercing blue eyes studied him intently. "Tell me more about this drug." "It's not just addictive, it's transformative," Gunnar explained. "It affects supernaturals differently depending on their type. It's about more than just power or chaos. It's about control. Whoever's behind it has a plan, and they're moving pieces into place faster than we can counter them." Eliana's brow furrowed slightly. "You believe this is tied to the Black Dawn?" "I'd bet my life on it," Gunnar said. "This isn't random, and it's not small scale. They're building something, a weapon, an army, or worse." Eliana nodded thoughtfully, her fingers tracing the edge of her staff. "And what of Eli's burden? You mentioned her being overwhelmed." "She's hand-engraving every round we use," Gunnar said, his tone grim. "She's brilliant, but it's too much. With everything else on her plate, security, tech repairs, magical analysis, we're stretched thin. If we're going to keep up, we need a better system." Eliana considered his words for a moment before replying. "There are elven artisans who specialize in mass enchantment. Their work is precise, and their methods could significantly reduce the strain on Eli without compromising quality. It would require diplomacy. These artisans are highly sought after." "I'll do whatever it takes," Gunnar said, "even if it means bartering with our own resources. This isn't just about Echo Division. It's about being ready for what's coming." Eliana's expression softened, admiration flickering in her eyes. "You've always been pragmatic, Gunnar. It's one of your greatest strengths." "There's one more thing," Gunnar added, his voice lowering slightly. "I need a gateway between Alfheim and the workshop, something secure, fortified. I've already constructed a room deep in the workshop's basement, heavily warded, reinforced against any intrusion. I'm even willing to let elven guards station there alongside my team." Eliana raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "A bold request. You'd bridge our realms permanently." "We're stronger together," Gunnar said. "And if the Black Dawn makes a move on Alfheim or Earth, we need a way to respond immediately. This isn't just a precaution. It's a necessity." Eliana's silence stretched for a moment, her gaze thoughtful. "I'll bring your proposal to the High Council. They'll need convincing, but your reasoning is sound. If they agree, this could be a turning point for both our worlds." "Turning points are what we need right now," Gunnar said, his voice firm. Eliana smiled faintly. "Very well. We'll take the first steps. For now, rest. Tomorrow I'll take you to meet the commanders before the graduation. If they see your resolve firsthand, they may be more inclined to support your cause." Gunnar nodded, a sense of relief mingling with his ever-present tension. The pieces were moving, but the game was far from over. The dining hall was small, tucked away in one of Alfheim's lesser-used towers, a space reserved for quiet reflection. The walls were adorned with tapestries depicting ancient battles and peaceful landscapes, their soft hues blending into the warm glow of floating crystal lanterns. A modest table sat in the centre, set with simple but elegant elven fare. Fruits that shimmered faintly, roasted meats seasoned with ethereal spices, and goblets of clear, sparkling liquid that seemed to catch the light like starlight. Gunnar sat at one end, his cybernetic arm resting carefully on the table, its weight a quiet reminder of the battles he had fought. Across from him, Eliana sat with her customary grace, her long platinum hair cascading over her shoulder like liquid silver. For a time neither spoke, the silence between them comfortable yet charged. "You've barely touched your food," Eliana said at last, her voice soft but edged with concern. "That's not like you." Gunnar glanced at his plate, then back at her, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. "Guess I'm just not used to eating in a place like this. Feels different." "Different?" Eliana raised an eyebrow, her tone teasing. "Or are you simply stalling because you're afraid to admit you're overwhelmed?" "Overwhelmed," Gunnar let out a low chuckle. "I've faced down demon kings, walked through shadow-infested realms, and held my own in battles most people couldn't dream of. Overwhelmed isn't in my vocabulary." Eliana's lips quirked into a soft smile, but her eyes didn't quite lose their concern. "You're a terrible liar, you know." Gunnar leaned back slightly, the smirk fading into something softer. "Maybe, but you know me well enough to figure that out." Her gaze softened, the weight of his words hanging between them. "I do," she said quietly. "Better than you might think." For a moment they were silent again, the quiet stretching like a thread between them. Eliana reached for her goblet, the movement slow and deliberate. "You carry so much on your shoulders, Gunnar. More than most could bear." "It's what I signed up for," he replied, his voice steady but low. "And it's not like you don't understand that. You've been doing it longer than I have." Her expression faltered, a flicker of pain crossing her face. "That doesn't make it easier." Their eyes met, the unspoken truth settling between them like a weight neither could shake. They'd walked parallel paths, bound by duty and sacrifice, always aware of the connection that could never fully be realized. "I envy Clora sometimes," Eliana admitted softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "She speaks her mind, acts on her instincts. She doesn't have the constraints we do." Gunnar's brow furrowed, his voice quiet but firm. "Clora looks up to you. She wouldn't be who she is without what you've taught her. And yet, I find myself wondering what I might have taught her if I weren't so bound by my own constraints," Eliana said, her gaze dropping to the table. "Sometimes I wonder." She didn't finish the sentence, and Gunnar didn't press her. Instead, he leaned forward, his voice gentler than she'd ever heard it. "You've done more than most could ever dream of, Eliana. And if it means anything, I think Clora knows that. I think everyone who's crossed your path knows that." Her lips quirked into a faint smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. "And you, Gunnar? What do you know?" He held her gaze, his single blue eye unflinching. "I know you're stronger than you think, and I know that if there's anyone I trust to keep the balance between realms, it's you." The words hung in the air, and for a moment it felt as if the room itself held its breath. Eliana's fingers tightened around her goblet, her eyes glistening faintly in the soft light. "Thank you," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Gunnar nodded, his throat tightening with words he couldn't say. They sat in silence for a time, the warmth of the meal and the quiet of the room wrapping around them like a fragile shield against the weight of their responsibilities. When the meal ended, Eliana rose, leading Gunnar through a narrow corridor to a small chamber. The bed was simple but comfortable, the window offering a view of the glowing spires of Alfheim in the distance. "You'll be safe here," Eliana said, her voice softer now. "Rest well, Gunnar. Tomorrow will be another long day." He nodded, his expression unreadable. "Good night, Eliana." She hesitated, her hand lingering on the doorframe. For a moment, it seemed as if she might say something more, but then she simply smiled, her gaze lingering on him, one last time before she turned and closed the door behind her. In the quiet of the room, Gunnar sat on the edge of the bed, staring out at the glowing spires. The ache in his chest was familiar, but tonight it felt sharper. He let out a slow breath, his fingers brushing against the runes on his cybernetic arm. "Good night, Eliana," he murmured to the empty room. The golden light of Alfheim's morning streamed through the high windows of the dining hall, casting soft patterns across the polished stone floor. Eliana was already seated at the table when Gunnar entered, the faint aroma of spiced bread and herbal tea wafting through the air. The meal was simple yet elegant, with vibrant fruits and delicately prepared dishes that seemed to glow with faint magic. "Good morning," Eliana greeted, her voice warm but composed. She gestured to the seat across from her. "I hope you slept well." Gunnar offered a faint smile, taking the seat and eyeing the spread before him. "Slept like a log. Your realm has a way of making even an old soldier like me feel a little lighter." Eliana chuckled softly, pouring tea into a delicate silver cup. "That's the magic of Alfheim. But I suspect your thoughts kept you anchored in your duties." "Always," Gunnar admitted, picking up a piece of bread and tearing it in half. "Too much going on to let my guard down." Her gaze lingered on him for a moment, a flicker of concern crossing her features before she composed herself. "I arranged for you to meet the commanders this morning at the War College. They've all heard of you. Your fight against the Demon King is legendary, even here." Gunnar paused, his hand stilling mid-reach for his cup. "Legendary, huh? Funny. It didn't feel so legendary when I was crawling out of that fight missing an arm and an eye." Eliana's expression softened, her voice low. "You don't give yourself enough credit. What you accomplished, what you endured, it saved countless lives." Gunnar's lips pressed into a thin line, and he nodded slowly. "Let's hope those commanders are as impressed as you are." "They will be," Eliana said with quiet certainty. "But be prepared. This is no ordinary meeting. The War College prides itself on its traditions, and its commanders are exacting." "Sounds like my kind of crowd," Gunnar replied, his smirk returning faintly. They finished the meal in comfortable silence, the weight of the upcoming meeting settling over them like a quiet storm. The Elven War College was a marvel of both architecture and history. Built into the side of a crystalline mountain, its towers and spires rose like gleaming beacons, their surfaces etched with runes that pulsed faintly in the morning light. The air was alive with the hum of magical wards, and the banners of Alfheim's great houses fluttered in the gentle breeze. Eliana led Gunnar through the grand entrance, her presence commanding yet graceful. As they walked, young elven cadets paused in their drills to glance at the man beside her, their whispers carrying a mix of awe and curiosity. At the end of a long corridor, the double doors to the commander's hall loomed tall and imposing. Two guards flanked the entrance, their armor gleaming like polished silver. They stepped aside with a nod as Eliana approached, pushing the doors open with a wave of her hand. Inside, the commanders awaited. The room was vast, its walls adorned with tapestries depicting battles both ancient and recent. A circular table dominated the center, surrounded by 5 elven commanders, each dressed in ornate armor that reflected their rank and achievements. Their expressions were unreadable, but their eyes were sharp, assessing Gunnar as he stepped inside. "This is Gunnar," Eliana announced, her voice clear and firm, leader of Echo Division and slayer of the Demon King, Ultranacious Eternus. The murmurs that followed were brief but palpable. One of the commanders, a tall elf with piercing green eyes and a scar running down his cheek, stood first. He inclined his head slightly. "We have heard much of your deeds, Gunnar. Few have faced the Demon King and lived to tell the tale." "Fewer still took him down," another commander added, her golden hair braided into an intricate crown. Her tone was cool, but there was a hint of respect beneath it. "Your reputation precedes you." Gunnar inclined his head, his posture relaxed but deliberate. "I appreciate the welcome, though I'm not much for titles. What matters is that the threat he posed is gone, at least for now." The scarred commander's eyes narrowed slightly. A pragmatic approach. But tell us, Gunnar, what brings you here today? Surely not just a graduation ceremony. Gunnar glanced at Eliana, who gave him a subtle nod. He stepped forward, his voice steady and measured. I came to talk about the Black Dawn. Their reach is growing, and if we don't start preparing now, they'll outpace us all. I've seen it happen before, and I don't plan on seeing it again. The golden-haired commander folded her arms, her gaze sharpening. And you believe Alfheim is at risk? I don't believe it. I know it, Gunnar replied. This drug we're seeing on Earth? It's not just about power or chaos. It's about control. And control on that scale means someone is building something big enough to affect all realms, not just mine. Eliana stepped forward, her voice calm but firm. What Gunnar says is true. The patterns are undeniable. If the Black Dawn isn't stopped, it will only be a matter of time before Alfheim becomes a target. The room fell silent as the commanders exchanged glances. Finally, the scarred commander spoke. And what do you propose, Gunnar? Gunnar's gaze swept the room, his tone unwavering. We need to start working together, sharing intelligence, resources. I've also proposed establishing a secure gateway between Alfheim and Echo Division's workshop, something fortified, heavily warded. I'm willing to station elven guards alongside my team to ensure its safety. The tension in the room was palpable, the weight of Gunnar's words settling heavily on the commanders. Finally, the golden-haired commander spoke again, her tone measured. Your proposal is bold, and your concerns are valid. But such a decision requires careful consideration. Alfheim does not open its doors lightly. I wouldn't expect it to, Gunnar replied. But this isn't about convenience, it's about survival. And if the Black Dawn makes their move, we'll need every advantage we can get. The commanders nodded slowly, their expressions thoughtful. Eliana placed a gentle hand on Gunnar's shoulder, her touch both reassuring and grounding. Thank you for your time, she said, her voice calm but resolute. We will await your decision. As Gunnar and Eliana left the hall, the tension between them softened, replaced by a quiet understanding. The weight of the meeting hung over them, but for now they had taken the first steps toward something greater. Do you think they'll agree? Gunnar asked as they walked back toward the courtyard. They're cautious, but they're not blind, Eliana replied. Your words carry weight, Gunnar, more than you realize. He nodded, the faintest hint of a smile crossing his face. Let's hope it's enough. After leaving the commander's hall, Eliana led Gunnar down a side corridor, lined with elven murals depicting centuries of battles and victories. The atmosphere was quieter here, the faint hum of magic still present, but subdued, as if the very walls of the War College respected the solemnity of its purpose. The commanders will deliberate, Eliana said, her voice calm but purposeful. In the meantime, there's someone else I'd like you to meet. He's had considerable experience working with Clora. Gunnar raised an eyebrow, his curiosity piqued. And who might that be? The garrison commander of the college, she replied. He oversees the military unit assignments and training programs. He's seen Clora's progress firsthand. Eliana led Gunnar into a sunlit courtyard where cadets were practicing drills under the watchful eye of a tall, broad-shouldered elf, clad in simple but immaculate armor. His hair was streaked with silver, his face weathered yet strong, and his piercing green eyes missed nothing. He turned as they approached, his expression neutral but respectful. Commander Illerith, Eliana greeted, inclining her head. This is Gunnar, Alpha of Echo Division. Illerith's gaze shifted to Gunnar, assessing him with the sharp precision of a seasoned warrior. Then he extended a hand. An honor to meet you, Gunnar. Stories of your battle against the Demon King have reached even here. Gunnar clasped the elf's hand firmly. I appreciate that, Commander. Though I imagine your stories about Clora might interest me more. Illerith's lips twitched into a faint smile, and he gestured for them to follow him toward a shaded bench near the training grounds. Clora Phelan is unique, he began, his tone thoughtful. She came to us as a human with no elven blood, carrying the weight of her pack and her role as alpha. Many here doubted her at first. Our traditions are deeply ingrained. She doesn't scare easily, Gunnar said, a faint smirk tugging at his lips. No, Illerith agreed, his expression softening. She does not. In fact, she challenged our preconceptions almost immediately. Clora has a way of adapting, not by losing herself, but by absorbing the strengths of those around her and using them to grow. He paused, his gaze drifting toward a group of cadets, sparring with precision and grace. When she was assigned to one of our military units, she faced significant resistance from her peers. But instead of demanding respect, she earned it through discipline, strategy, and an unwavering commitment to her team. Gunnar's expression shifted, his pride evident. That sounds like her. There is one incident in particular that stands out, Illerith continued. A simulated mission went awry, the parameters suddenly shifting due to a magical malfunction. Chaos ensued, and her unit was thrown into disarray. Clora took command, not with orders but by leading. She guided her team through the exercise with precision and calm, even when the odds were against them. By the end, not a single cadet questioned her place among them. He turned back to Gunnar, his green eyes steady. She's earned the respect of every elf here, myself included. Whatever doubts existed at the start have long since vanished. Gunnar's jaw tightened slightly, his pride mingling with the weight of responsibility. She's come far, but it sounds like she hasn't forgotten who she is. No, Illerith said, his tone firm. She hasn't, and that's her greatest strength. She carries her humanity like a shield, not as a weakness, but as a reminder of what sets her apart. There was a moment of silence, the hum of the training grounds filling the air. Then Illerith turned to Aeliana, his expression thoughtful. You've chosen well to guide her. I merely provided the tools, Aeliana said with a faint smile. Clora built herself? Illerith nodded, his gaze returning to Gunnar. If you ever doubted her readiness, Gunnar, let me assure you, she is more than ready for whatever challenges lie ahead. Gunnar met his gaze, his voice steady. I never doubted her, but it's good to hear it from someone who's seen her in action. The commander inclined his head. If you'll excuse me, I must return to the drills. It was an honor, Gunnar. The honor's mine, Gunnar replied, clasping the elf's forearm briefly before turning back toward Aeliana. As they walked away, Gunnar glanced at her, his tone lighter. You've done good work here. So have you, Aeliana replied, her voice warm. Clora wouldn't be the leader she is without your guidance. Maybe, Gunnar said, his smirk faint but genuine. But it's good to know she's not just carrying my expectations. She's got a world of her own now. They walked on in comfortable silence, the weight of the conversation settling into something akin to pride.
Well, you found your way to the end, haven't you? That must mean you're curious, and we love curiosity around here. Before you vanish into the ether, take a moment to subscribe. It's just a click, and trust me, you'll want to stay in the loop for what comes next. And while you're at it, give the video a like. The energy exchange is good for you. Hit that notification bell too. You wouldn't want to miss out on any of our magical misadventures. Who knows what I might conjure up next? Alright, off you go. But remember, I'll know if you didn't subscribe. See you on the other side.